It's time to talk about threading text frames together. I've opened up this RU article file from my exercise folder, and I'm going to jump to the next spread by pressing Option page down or Alt page down on Windows. And I'll use Command spacebar or Control spacebar to zoom in just at the top of this page. I see here that I have two frames, one full and one empty. And in this full one on the left, down here in the lower right corner, I see a symbol, a little plus sign, and that is an indicator that this text frame is overset. There's more text than can fit into this frame. Now, we could make the text frame bigger, of course, but in this case, we want the text to flow from this frame into this empty frame. This is called threading. You thread from one frame to another. Now, you'd think you'd use the Type tool to do this. After all, you're dealing with text. But in fact, it won't work with the Type tool. It's a strange quirk of InDesign. You have to use the Selection tool. You select one of the frames with the Selection tool, and then you'll notice in the upper left corner, there's a little square that's very similar to the one in the lower right corner. Those little squares are called the ports, in-port and out-port. All text flows in through the in-port and out through the out-port. So to get text out of this text frame, I'm going to click on the out port with my selection tool. Now notice that it loads the place cursor. The place cursor lets me thread from one frame into another, or it will even let me create a text frame. Notice how the cursor changes depending where I place it. Out here at the top of the page, where there's no frames at all, the cursor has a sharp edge. That indicates that it's going to thread into a new frame. If I click or click and drag, it'll make a frame and then thread the text into it. But if I move it down a little bit, I get a different cursor, which means it's going to thread from one frame into the current frame, the one that's hiding there. In this case, I'm simply going to click, and you'll see the thread happen. This text is threading from the left frame to the right one, but it's hard to tell that. There's no visual indicator. So we're going to go to the View menu, come down to Extras, and turn on Show Text Threads. That way you get this little colored line that goes from one port to the next. In fact, if I move this frame down, you'll see that line a little bit more clearly. It always threads from one port to the next. Okay, so we threaded these together, but what if we didn't want that? What if we want to break that thread? How can we do that? It's really easy. All you do is double-click on one of the ports. Doesn't matter which, the in port or the out port. In this case, I'll double-click on this in port, and it breaks the link again. You can see that this text frame is now overset once again. By the way, some people call this linking text frames, but linking actually means something different in InDesign. It means maintaining a link to files on your hard drive so that if they change, InDesign changes too. I'm going to talk about that in detail in a later chapter. So remember, when you're talking about text flowing from one frame to another, always call it threading.